Welcome to Creating Sci-Fi and Fantasy, an Inside Look, a podcast dedicated to understanding the inspiration and creation of sci-fi, fantasy, and comic books. Thank you and enjoy. Hi, in today's podcast, I interview graphics designer Anthony Err. He's been doing graphics design for quite some time, and he's supporting an independent science fiction film project or TV show project called Dark Operations Terminus. I interviewed Anthony at Farpoint 2018 about how he does his work, what he uses, and what inspires him. So thanks and enjoy. I'm here at Farpoint 2018 with graphics specialist Anthony Err. Thank you for speaking with me.
Not a problem. Thank you.
So tell me about this project, this work.
Sure. I'm one of the actually the CG artist for Dark Operations Terminus. Mm-hmm. They've asked me to help them with getting all the graphics for the video ready to go, creating all the ship models, the battle scenes, and the graphics to support all of that to put into their film.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you design it yourself, or do you get artists and work with?
So right now it's been a combination of working directly with the executive producer and some of the other artists, or the art director, I guess, of the entire film itself. And then working back and forth with them, I kind of take their concepts and I generate the 3D models for them. So right now it's been mostly myself on the Dark Operations Terminus, but they did have initial models that we pulled reference from and tried to recreate things and bring everything up to speed.
Have you, is there any past graphics work you've done that you'd like to mention?
Sure. I mean, I've actually been an art director and an animation technology lead for a long time for the U.S. Army Gaming Interactive Technologies and Multimedia branch. So the day job is creating military applications for training our soldiers, so I have a lot of that background. So instead of the serious gaming aspect, I get to have a little bit of fun.
So how do you know, or how will you know when your artwork is finished, and elements or whatever?
Sure. As far as if we're looking at individual elements, it's primarily once I have a ship or another component ready to go, I go to the executive producer and the art director of the entire film and just try to get their sign off on it. Mm-hmm. If they like it, we're good. We print it and go forward with it per se. Otherwise, a lot of it, it's just they've had no problems with most of the stuff I've delivered. It's just once I'm able to get what they have in their head digitally, that's the important thing. Mm-hmm. So once they sign off, that's to me when it's done.
So what inspires you
to do this type of work? I'd have to say I'm an avid gamer, or at least not as much as I used to. As you get older, the fun stuff of that. But I'd have to say it's definitely been a lot of I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan, things along those lines. So I did a lot of that growing up. And then in high school and in college, I got really into doing a lot of the Star Trek, watching that and such. But I'd say I take a lot of inspiration from some of those younger memories of my life when I would play a lot of those D&D games and watch the Star Trek. So.
What is the most important tool in your workspace?
So the most important tool, software count or?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd have to say, for me personally, it's really a suite of tools because they kind of all go hand in hand. From the content creation side, I'd have to say it's usually most of the Autodesk software suite. So Maya, 3 Studio Max, Motion Builder, things along those lines to help me generate the content that we need to put into the game. And then on the rendering side, I tend to use the Unreal Game Engine. So we have those real-time graphics. So I'd say it's a toss-up between the content creation and Unreal. I like Unreal because of the better, you see the end result quicker. So.
Is there something special you need in your workspace, something unique to you maybe?
I'd have to say my collections of Transformers toys around the office. Oh. I have a lot of old school Generation 1 toys, as well as anything I can just pull to just get me into the right state of mind to do it. So whether it be playing music in the background, classical music, something like that, or if I'm in the heavy metal mode, go ahead and listen to some of that as I really focus in on my work.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. So, yeah.
Is there an element of graphics design that you enjoy working with most, and why?
Yeah, I'd have to say, for me, right now, it's a lot into I'm really heavy into 3D printing as well. So the biggest element to me is being able to, when you do graphic design in the computer, it's a digital file. It's great. You see the 3D models on screen, and that's fine. For me, it's definitely when I take that model from that step and start figuring out, okay, now how can I make this into a physical product? So a lot of their ship designs, I started looking into how can I do 3D prints of these, because I'd like to eventually do model kits of them. So to me, it's getting the models out. So I see all the hard work from the concept art that they originally gave me to the digital files, and then a physical reproduction of that, utilizing either SLA printing or PLA or FDM, something along those lines.
Do you anticipate printing out a whole piece, or maybe pieces of an object that you kind of bring together in some way?
It depends on the size they're looking for.
Yeah.
So if we're doing things like pistols or whatnot, and what type of printing tech we're going for, a lot of times it's designed in segments. So then you can put it together, also looking at it from a standpoint of if they ever want to go to the model kit making or the mass production per se, how would I design this properly so it can easily be resin casted or something along those lines. So it's taking a lot of the, I guess I would say, industrial manufacturing thought process behind it and reproduction capabilities, and going from that. So most models, like the models that they have displayed on the table, because they want it to be a higher quality, I broke those up into smaller segments to fit into a stereolithography printer. Otherwise, I could have done it in an FDM printer at full size, but you don't get that same quality.
So how did you start doing graphic design?
Sure. For me, it was basically right out of college. When I was in college, or I should say in high school, really. In high school, I was actually in a computer coding class, learning how to do Visual Basic, if you can remember back in the 80s, or no, late 90s. So it was while doing that, another student was doing an independent study in that same class of mine, and I looked over and I saw him doing computer animation. And I was like, what's that? He's like, oh, this is, it's 3D Studio DOS back in the day. And I saw that, and I was looking at the lines of code. I said, well, forget this. I want to do that instead. So that's really what kickstarted my whole thing. So it was one of those things. I know the normal process is you start with traditional art and then do 3D. I went in reverse. Did 3D and then eventually started training to do traditionally so I can do better 3D. So.
And so why do you continue doing it?
For me, it's just, it's kind of a passion at this point in time. I just get a lot of satisfaction out of creating the digital artwork, be it either in ZBrush if I want to do digital sculpting, or just making the models. It's just, I get in that frame set of mind, and I like to think very mechanically and technically as far as how things can be put together. So a lot of the designs I'll do, it's almost like if I'm trying to do it in an engineering software package where I'm trying to create a model for physical production as opposed to digital and then maybe 3D printed. So it's just it's a nice technical challenge. I like to look at any particular object that seems like it would be a challenge to make, and I want to just basically challenge myself to do it. So
how did your first professional success in graphics design change the way you did it?
I'd have to say it was definitely along the lines of I'm a perfectionist when it comes to certain stuff. And as I was doing stuff at the day job, creating some of the content for our engineers and scientists, it was one of those things where I learned that listening to the voice of the client, per se, and trying to illustrate exactly what they need, as opposed to pushing myself to be like, oh, I want this thing to look graphically amazing, or I need this to do that. The most important skill I learned is to adjust to what the client is really looking for. Because as an artist, it's hard to, I shouldn't say, it's very easy to go overboard and make things look amazing or well beyond what the client needed.
Right.
And it's one of those, especially working with the military, you kind of judge exactly what they need, and that, from having that experience, it really gave me the opportunity to look at graphic design from a different standpoint, as opposed to there's different aspects of it. There is we're looking for a technical illustration, or we're looking for a billboard type of thing, or we're looking for an animation of how a weapon system or a component works, compared to we're looking for how a character is running. Right. So there's a lot of different nuances there, and that's pretty much that. So,
So what role does graphic design have in society?
kind of touches everything, especially if taking a look at any of the products we purchase, or even the independent films that are created. So they all have elements of graphic design in them, or 3D animation and 3D modeling. It's just it touches a little bit of everything, especially if you break it down to the fact of product manufacturing. You're designing what the product's going to look like. You're thinking about it from an ergonomic standpoint, how the human's going to interact with it, or the end client's going to use it. So I think in general, it touches every portion of society, and it's really a part of everyday life to understand your client and design whatever product or video or something you're trying to produce to get to them and really reach into their heartstrings per se, or their hands, depending if it's going to be physical.
So when you're doing science fiction graphic design, is it more important that it looks cool or that it looks realistic and plausible?
See, it depends. So whatever, again, looking at your audience at that standpoint, right? If you're doing sci-fi for something that is, let's say, a cartoony type show, then the realistic look doesn't always necessarily need to be there. But believability is the different story. So that, you don't want to be putting some type of tech out there that looks completely impossible, like we can never achieve that. If you take a little bit of science fiction and ground it with science fact, that helps a lot. Graphics always make it look good, so if you compare it to a lot of today's Star Trek shows and anything else, they do both. Looks great, because a lot of them still use practical effects as opposed to digital effects, but they kind of go hand in hand, I think.
What other graphic design work has inspired you?
For me personally, I'd have to say if we go look into more so animation, right? That's really one of the biggest things that inspires me. Even to this day, I still have Cartoon Network on in the background as I'm doing work or something along those lines. Just especially looking at traditional masters. When you take a look at some of the early animations, even the name skips my mind right now, but when they started doing initial stop motion animation, and it was the dinosaur, I forget the name of the show, but it was the first stop motion. Just looking at that and how they were able to accomplish that back in the time when it was created, and then looking at some of the traditional quality films from Walt Disney and the products they put out. Just looking at the quality of the animation then, when they were all doing it hand-drawn, one frame at a time, 24 frames per second, compared to now where it's digital. I think digital has, in some instances, made us lazy in animation, kind of, but not always. Whereas you see what they're able to accomplish with a pen and paper compared to today, what we have and how far we can go with it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is there anything in science that inspires you?
Yes, I would have to definitely say everything. I was also a science nut and going to school as well. So for me, it's a lot of I like to read a lot of the quantum theories and the quantum mechanics and things like that, is how it works, especially now that we're going into an era of quantum computing and seeing how that can be applied. So I'm really interested myself in a lot of that. So whatever little bit of time I have outside of work, which is very minimal, just try to study up on it. I find it fascinating how we're being everything from, like I said, the quantum computers down to the nanoscience, the nanotechnology and things along those lines. It's just fascinating to see how quickly, as a society and as a species, we've developed from crawling on our, as a primordial ooze or whatever we were, to where we are now in such a short time frame.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What movies, books, music, or other creative media in sci-fi or fantasy have inspired you?
So, if we look in books, I'd have to definitely say Lord of the Rings, because I'm a huge, by saying the D&D stuff back in the day, that was my go-to. When I initially graduated school, I wanted to do Hollywood videos or anything else along those lines. So that was my passion as a child. So definitely, any fantasy is my number one. Science fiction is a second level mine. But a lot of it too it's just some of the music from these shows as well. So Howard Shore with his brilliant score on Lord of the Rings, listening to that whole multiple times. But just anything that really is able to get me into the mindset and just transport me per se from the real life into a place of Zen. Let's go.
Yeah.
So
So you're, I guess when you say place of Zen, you're referring to games as a place of Zen?
That is one part of it, yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, there are very few games nowadays compared to some of the older games. Like, there's a few game series that I can pick up and be completely enthralled in them and just play from start to finish and not realizing the entire day has gone by.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that fascinates me. Like, you have the opportunity to do that if you make your game well and you have a really good storyline. I think a lot of today's games, everyone focuses so much on multiplayer. Multiplayer is okay, don't get me wrong. I like single-player campaigns where I'm involved in the story, and a lot of that seems to be going away compared to focusing on multiplayer. So.
Yeah, because I was thinking some games are all about solving a puzzle or you're just obsessing about it.
Yes.
So that's why I asked about the Zen thing. It's
yes.
Sometimes...
Yeah, I mean, so Puzzle Quest is one that I love.
Yeah.
That's like that. So that is a sit down and just play that out. But yeah, puzzle, they work.
Yeah. Is there a superpower or advanced tech that you wanted when you were younger?
There was, and I have to say, it was kind of from back in the X-Men days, Nightcrawler, the ability to just teleport from one spot to another as long as you can either see it or physically remember what's there.
Yeah.
To me, that was a fascinating power that would have. Because you could always just be in a situation where you're like, oh, crap, for lack of better words, and just zip on out and, okay, I'm somewhere else. Then I'd have to say, techie-wise, it would definitely be a lot of the, though I myself would never want to have a bionical, like a limb removed for the purposes of having something like that. I think that, the possibility of having something like a bionic arm or a bionic instrument of some sort, maybe a bionic heart, because we're probably getting closer to that type of stuff in the event, to just prolong your life so you can get as much out of the meat sacks that we have.
Yeah.
So just experience as much as you can.
Yeah. It's funny, I just interviewed, do you know Peter David, the author?
Yeah.
When I asked him the power thing, the first thing he said was the Nightcrawler's teleportation. So I'm like, wow, that's just heard it twice in a row.
Yep.
That's
Small world.
Yeah, it is. Is there a dream game that you'd love to create?
Yeah, I would have to say. For me, it would definitely be one of those where, so now in this era we're moving more back into virtual reality, even though we were there before at one point. I'd have to say I'd like to be able to create the equivalent of a VR world where you can go and do a couple of different things. So if we look at it from a serious game standpoint, I'd like to be able to create a game where you get to transport the end user to that virtual world where if they're in a terminally ill state or something where they can forget for a little bit of time, just to be able to experience euphoria and happiness and forget whatever's ailing them at the time.
Right.
And then I'd also like to take something similar to that where even if you're completely fine, create a virtual world where you're in there and you don't realize you're in there. You're able to experience the world for whatever the author of this world created. So you wanted to say, so I know they have things like Skyrim in VR now, but the ability to be able to go back into these other eras and experience places you've never done, virtually, because it's a lot cheaper than physically. So
Yeah. When you mention that, though, I think about the ethics where if you go in and you forget you're there, and then
that is the question. Yeah.
All right. And where can people find this?
So the Dark Operations stuff that we're working on right now, you can find on Facebook. It should be, I just search for Dark Operations Terminus on Facebook, or just Dark Operations, you'll find their page.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for any of the work I do involving with them, it's at nextgenimaging.com is where all of my personal work and the 3D print type work I do for them.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Please visit chrisalvarez.com for more cool stuff. You can also find my website and social media information in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening, and keep imagining the future.